Okay, welcome everybody to this iMoot session. We're going to hear a bit today about getting started with gamification from Vinny Stocker, who for iMooters really needs no introduction, but he's the head honcho at Pukunui in Malaysia, and is really one of the prime movers and shakers behind iMoot itself. So, Vinny, take it away, and I'm sure we're going to be informed and entertained at the end of this.
Cross your fingers, but no promises. Thanks, Andy. Thank you, and welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time today to watch my presentation. I think what I'll probably do is kill my webcam because it will. I know some people are connected on lower bandwidth connections, so this is me. Right? There you go. You know what I look like now. So I'm going to kill the webcam to preserve some bandwidth for people. So as Andy said, my name is Vinny. I've been one of the main iMoot organisers for the last few years now. I work for Pukunui. So Pukunui is also one of the sponsors of the iMoot. So the history there, I guess, is Pukunui started up the iMoot, but over time, Pukunui's role has got less and less, and we've been getting more and more community involvement in the iMoot. I'm based in Malaysia, so I have been here now for 8 years, and half of that running the Malaysian company for Pukunui. So I'm talking about gamification today. And to be honest, I was in two minds whether to do this because it's kind of a little bit old hat. You know, gamification was so 2012, but I kind of felt like it was a good opportunity just to bring a bunch of stuff together. This is aimed at people that are fairly fresh to gamification, and so almost kind of summarizing some of the concepts. So I'll be talking about kind of game mechanics and game elements and things like that. Most of it will be quite general in the first part of the presentation, and then in the second part of the presentation, I'll look at firstly how you can add some of these game elements to individual activities, individual courses, and in fact across whole Moodle sites. And then finishing up with a look at a few useful third-party plugins for gamification. So that's a little bit about me and presentation that you'll be listening to over the next 30, 35, 40 minutes. If you do have questions, then please feel free to pop them into the chat. David, I'm just going to turn your microphone off. Thanks. If you do have any questions, then please pop them into the chat, and I'll be happy to try to answer them. So I thought I'd start by sharing a quote that I quite like. Gamification is the use of game thinking, game mechanics to engage users in solving problems. Actually, I missed the mess off there, solving problems. So it's about taking some of these, what we're going to do is take some ideas of game thinking and game mechanics and try to put them into the Moodle context. Okay, so to begin with, we'll have a look at some of the components. So these are things that you see being part of gamified online learning courses. The first one, and probably these aren't in any particular order, but this one is one of the most important, I think, is being able to put your own feel and flavor on your Moodle course. So that could be through avatars, just different ways that you can connect with the students that you're helping learn. And I'm not going to give you any particular tools for this. There's all sorts of different tools available for making interactive recorded cartoons and all of that kind of thing. But you know, at the bare minimum for an online course, you should have something that introduces you as the teacher, a video, a little bit of a bio, just especially if it is remote teaching and not kind of blended. I guess most of you guys probably use Moodle in a blended context where your students already get to know you, and then Moodle backs up all of the face-to-face learning. But really, it's great to have those kind of avatars and make a Moodle course a reflection of you, the teacher. Other things that you would see, you know, in a gamified course, some kind of badges, points, and that can also be linked in with all the competition side of it that I'll talk about later. It's a way that your users can kind of collect things, and certainly within Moodle, you've got all the built-in badges, collect things and display their kind of status, display their achievements, display their understanding. I love this little, it's been floating around for a little while on the internet, and it just popped up on my Facebook feed the other day. Other things you tend to see in gamified courses is the idea of some kind of progression and levels. Yeah, and I just remember playing, you know, Space Invaders or Pac-Man for hours and hours, and just trying to progress through different parts, different stages. So we'll have a look a little bit later how we can kind of get some of these levels, get some of these progression into our Moodle courses. And another feature of gamified courses and game components to put into courses are things like missions, and being able to give your users the ability to explore either some of the learning materials or a specific learning item, to be able to give different paths, different routes through the content, to give them that kind of sense of ownership of the material, but just to kind of tingle all those neurons in their brains, you know, get them exploring and finding out. And I love to put in, you know, little hidden Easter eggs and all that kind of stuff. I was doing some training recently with a university here in Malaysia, and it was a kind of Star Warsy theme course that I built for them. And I hid all of these tiny little icons throughout the course, just as Easter eggs, and they had to collect some of them and get a reward for it. And it was just amazing to see adults getting so excited and exploring parts of the course, just to try to find all of these badges they were collecting and going on these little missions exploring the course. So those are some of the, and it's certainly not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the kind of features that you would have in a gamified Moodle course. The next part of the presentation, I'm going to introduce some different mechanisms and ways to control to control the gamified course. So all of these, I've got a picture of an amazing old-fashioned control room from something. All of the pictures, by the way, are from Pixabay, the only place that I go to these days to find pictures for presentations and things. Okay, so let's have a little look at Pixabay, P-I-X-A-B-A-Y, I think it's spelled, Pixabay. Thank you very much, Stefan. Yeah, amazing. It's all under Creative Commons licensing. No attribution as well on most of it. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at a few mechanisms to control games. So what we're talking about are things that you can build into your courses to kind of adjust user behavior or create patterns of repeated behavior. So I guess the simplest kind of ideas of control mechanisms are things like turns. You know, in a simple game, you would take it in turns with somebody. I play a lot of Monopoly with my daughter, who continually thrashes me. I'm sure she's worked out. She's young. I'm sure she's worked out a way to cheat already. Yeah, all games, or a majority of games, I won't say all, because the kind of exploratory type of games don't necessarily always have turns. But most games would have some kind of element of taking turns. There would certainly be ideas of rewards and failure, and a kind of end point of the game. So what you need to do to win the game. So in a Moodle context, we can throw in things like you know, course completion or activity completion, and rewards and failures. And these are also the motivating factors that you can use to kind of control behaviors of people. You know, students want to, I believe students inherently want to achieve, they want to do well, you know, and reward them for their achievements. I'm just trying to, sorry, I can't talk and read at the same time, which is why I paused for a moment there. Failure is always a far better for learning than success. Yeah, totally. If you get it all right all the time, how are you going to improve? You can certainly learn a lot more from failure. There was a picture that I didn't include that I was going to of a girl falling off of her bike. The first thing that she's going to do is get back on and try again. And so without failing, you can't. You know, this actually brings me on to something about feedback later, but it's all part of the learning process, isn't it? Which brings me on to feedback. So, you know, part of your gamified course, and again for controlling the user's actions, is that feedback. That could be positive feedback, could be negative feedback, it could be informational feedback. But there's certainly going to be, you know, if you want to get them to be progressing through certain levels, then they're going to need to know that feedback and what they need to do to get onto the next stages. And the last, I think this is my last one, the last part in terms of kind of game mechanics or control mechanisms for a gamified course is both the ideas of teamwork and competition. Now, I'm not saying take all of these things and try and squeeze them all into one particular Moodle course, but, you know, design your courses bearing some of these things in mind. So, you know, allow opportunity for teamwork, but also allow opportunities for competition. Both of those things can be used to encourage, to motivate your learners. You know, if you think about the kind of things that motivate you, and you know, it's going to be built around a lot of what I've said already. And teamwork and competition, those two factors, it's within a community, are very, very strong influencing factors on behavior. Who remembers these books? Amazing. I was thinking about these the other day when I was planning this. For those of you that don't know, these are fighting fantasy, kind of build your own. Sorry, the tagline was create your own adventure, where you read a page and then it says, do you want to fight the goblin? Turn to page 2 or turn to page 10 if you want to run away and hide behind the bush, that kind of thing. Yeah, this suddenly flooded me with memories of reading hundreds of these when I was young. Spend hours working through, trying to get to the end of it, and then an ogre will come and step on you or something, and then you have to try and almost try and cheat it, work backwards and work out what you needed to do to find the right path, towards the end of the book. Yeah, totally. In fact, I might try and see if I can order a few off Amazon, get back into them. I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, but okay. So this I use just as a personal example of adding kind of experiences into your Moodle courses, and linking this kind of with gamification and good learning. Good learning happens when there's strong emotional connections to things. So you're thinking about ice cream now, but giving your users, your people on your course, opportunities to choose their own learning, opportunities to control their own learning or the path through the gamified course. Now, all of these, I should say, all of these is probably stuff that you do already as good educators. But the gamification thing is putting it into that kind of complete package, just not an open-ended unit of study with this, and this. It's sitting down, planning, either making a certain path that you want to steer your users through that content, or giving them stepping stones and rewards at the end, and kind of adding those bits of competition elements into the course. I guess what I'm trying to say is really the whole thing, and planning what that product looks like that you're delivering to your students. Elements of challenge and risk. If the material isn't challenging, then your students aren't going to be engaged in the content. And certainly for gamified courses, I think one of the biggest things that you can have is just elements of fun. And I guess this goes right back to the beginning as well, where I was talking about personification and putting your stamp on your courses. Giving it your bits of your own personality to help kind of engage those students in your course. So really, that first section of today's presentation is just kind of summarizing a bunch of concepts and a bunch of ideas that you can put into your Moodle courses, either to control the users, to carve out a particular path, or to some of those elements to pop into it. So the second part of what we'll look at is how to put some of these ideas into Moodle courses. So the first thing, so this will be in kind of 3 slides. First thing, gamification of individual Moodle activities. Second part will be gamification of Moodle courses, a whole Moodle course. And then the third part, as I said earlier, would be just a few ideas to gamify whole Moodle sites. And for me, you know, there's other ways that you can kind of pop game elements into a bunch of different Moodle activities. But for me, the lesson activity lends itself best to gamification in terms of those kind of exploratory, carving your own path type elements. So this is actually an example that I got from Moodle.net. In fact, if you have a look on Moodle.net for lesson activities, then you'll probably be able to find it, one by Mary Cooch. And this is one that I've used when I've talked about gamification before. It's quite a nice lesson activity, and it's very similar to those Fighting Fantasy books that I was talking about, where clicking through, you can, it will give you a series of options, and it's about overthrowing a government based on the decisions that you make, whether you manage to overthrow the government or not. It's just a simple idea, and it's just a nice example of how you can use the lesson activity for those kind of those exploratory type activities within Moodle. When you start to get interesting things happening is kind of linking things together. So, for instance, that I've linked together with the activity results block, which up until that used to be the quiz results block, and then it was extended to be used across most scored Moodle activities. This is another, so it's back to the reference earlier about Star Wars themed gamification course. So I divided up my users into 2 particular groups, BB-8 and R2-D2. They all had their little icons that identified them as part of the group. And it was interesting seeing how their engagement changed once they knew that they were working in that group, and also that there was that competition and element against the other group. So I'm not, you know, the groups are big enough that you can't identify contributions from individuals. So we kind of turned it into a competition between the 2 groups. But immediately we had, just with 2 simple things, we've got loads of different game elements. We've got the competition between the 2 groups, and we've also got the collaboration within the groups. We've got the users kind of exploring the materials on their own as well, and giving them that ownership and that control of those materials. And that's just one example. If you've got other examples, then I guess maybe hold on to them for a sec, and we'll do some Q&As at the end. But I'd love to hear of your examples if you've got other similar, especially using the lesson. I'm really fond of the lesson at the moment. If you've got any other examples used in your Moodle courses. So that was a quick example about gamifying particular activity. So the kind of the stepping outwards, gamifying Moodle courses. So things like badges, which we've talked about, so that kind of reward which is a motivational thing. We've got conditional access and restrict access. And as people, I'm sure you guys have been Moodling for many moons. You're familiar with conditional access and restrict access, linking that in with course completion status. You can then start to include game elements into an entire course. If you don't know about conditional access, restrict access, ask some of the other Moodlers around here, or have a look at some of the there's a bunch of iMoot recordings from previous years on YouTube if you Google for them. They're on Pukunui's YouTube channel. They go through all conditional access and course completion. So you can, by using those restricting access, you can have certain activities appear and disappear depending on certain restrictions that you put in. If they do this activity, and if they get over a certain percentage, then a new one can appear. If they get less than a certain percentage, then a different one can appear. And you can start to, again, carve out all these different paths for your learners to take them through the material to get to a particular endpoint linked to the course completion. I thought I'd throw at you just a few ideas for gamifying across a Moodle site. And so I thought for this, I'd maybe focus on looking at levels as a particular game concept. So, and actually, I think this is probably, I started to have a conversation with maybe some of you in the mini moot that we had back in November about levels for teachers. It would be, if I was starting a Moodle site in a school from scratch, then I would certainly, I probably wouldn't immediately put all my teachers on the standard editing teacher role within Moodle. You know, quite easily, you can create a bunch of different roles, call them whatever you want. You could call it level 1 teacher, level 2 teacher, level 3 teacher. If you wanted to force some kind of idea of progression, or bronze teacher, silver teacher, gold teacher, you know, they may start getting quite competitive. Teachers are probably more competitive than students, I think, sometimes. Or if you know, just give them colors of the rainbow or something like that, if you want to keep it fairly neutral. But certainly, you know, you could create a custom role that just had a few basic things. And by that, I'm meaning just to restrict access, to prevent teachers from being able to create things like some of the more advanced activities, prevent them from creating workshops, lesson activities, possibly even prevent them from being able to upload resources. You could start on a very simple teacher role. So maybe being able to add forum activities to a Moodle site and assignment activities, maybe just those two, simple. Or maybe let them put on a couple of resources, URLs, something like that. Until they can prove that they have mastered those things, then they can progress to the next level. Then you can let them upload their resources. You can, you know, you can pull out, you could use configurable reports added to your Moodle site to actually see what some of your teachers are doing. And until they've shown you that they can add forums to the course, add assignments to the course, Then if they can do that, okay, put them onto the next roll up, which might give them access to more of the standard Moodle activities. For instance, just an idea, just a suggestion. I'm just going to take a breath for a second and have a look at the chats. Would just marking be a start, then encouraged to learn more? Yeah, certainly. I mean, you know, it could be as a level. Yeah. So it depends what you want out of your teachers and what you want out of your Moodle courses. But, you know, you could start off, that's kind of, I guess you're suggesting the non-editing teacher role. But maybe even that would, in what I'm kind of thinking of, maybe something that the teachers creating content on their course. So, I mean, at the moment, you've got the non-editing role, the editing role. My example was more about customizing or creating multiple different levels of the editing teacher role. So the gamification across the site, you could kind of have levels for students. So again, I've put levels for students brackets, but not really. So basically just multiple copies of the student role, but you know, named in different fashions, to that you can kind of almost kind of cheat it to show some kind of progression of the students. You could open up extra features for the students, like allow them to be able to create quiz questions and things like that. So again, you could, within your Moodle site, you could kind of use the permission systems to kind of create these levels for progression. And then the third thing, which is not related to the top two there, restriction by course completion. You know, if you've got a bunch of small courses, then again, you can restrict. You can't with course completion. You can set it so that you can't complete course B until you've completed course A. You can be enrolled on both of them at the same time, but you can't complete that second course until you've completed the first one. So again, it can be, you can kind of create almost forcing your users to be able to complete a series of courses before they've reached the final course, the reward course. Okay, so what useful Moodle plugins are available at the moment? And I'm a little bit annoyed at myself because I meant to credit the plugin developers. The progress bar is Michael Durat, which is fantastic. And the only reason why I say it, I was going to say it should be part of Core Moodle, but there's a few other similar things like checklist you can use in a very similar way, but it would be nice to have something like that in Core. And the progress bar is a fantastic tool for certainly for using gamifying Moodle courses, so the students can see their end point, they know exactly what they need to do to complete the course. And as a teacher, you get to see that overview of the students, what progress they've made, and what they haven't completed. Really nice. Checklist and checklist block, similar but different. Something which is a little bit more in the kind of that idea of gamifying, where you're collecting points and you're getting scores, is the ranking block. It works with, actually, let me just have how many of you have used this one? Is this one that you know of? Have you come across this before? Okay, cool. So this one and the next one that I'm going to talk about, that's interesting, Anna. Cool. Okay, interesting. So Anna's comment in chat. We'll see if the progress bar we pushed into Moodle Core is in the 10 projects of Moodle User Association. Yeah, I haven't looked at the Moodle User Association. I didn't know it was part of one of the projects they're looking to get integrated. That's cool. Yeah, so the ranking block, it works with activity completion tracking. So to use it, you need to have activity completion tracking set up on your site, and you need activities that can be completed. Completion of an activity, so it fits something simple like clicking on a URL or viewing a page resource. Then you just get a certain number of points for it, and it's all customizable. I think the standard number of points it gives you is 2, but yeah, you can change those. If it's a graded activity, then you get the grade that you receive in that activity, plus also some points. So I guess it's the idea, kind of going back to Dungeons and Dragons, where you're getting your experience points after every round. You're gaining experience in the course, and it does display it in a block on the side of the page. You can see overviews, weekly overviews, monthly overviews as well, of the users. The next one, which is actually called experience points. Now let's have a look. This is going to test my big blue button skills. I'm going to try and zoom in on some of this. Before I zoom in too far, again, this is a Moodle plugin found on Moodle.org in the plugins area. So it's called Experience Points. It's part of a set. If I zoom across, so there's 2 things in the set. One is the level up block. That's not what I just showed you. That's the one that I'm just about to show you. It looks like this here. It's the level up block and level up availability. Now this starts getting really interesting when you can start to restrict access to certain activities based on the level that the students are at. So the way that this particular plugin works is this is actually from the student's view. The teacher has got a bunch of other different tabs along there. So again, it's a way of collecting points through both a Moodle course and also a Moodle site. You can use this one to total up how many points they are collecting across multiple courses. And they gain points, and what do points make? Prizes. They gradually, these are my different users that were using it. As they get different number of points, they progress to higher levels. Now the rules for this plugin are slightly different. It's basically linked to, if I go out a little bit, it's basically linked to event monitoring within Moodle, and you can make up your own rules, but there's a bunch of standard rules in there. It looks at the participation. It looks at the teaching area and whether it's whether the student is at the educational level is participating, and awards points if there is something. I've forgotten my acronym. Create, read, update, delete, and different numbers of experience points are awarded. So if the users are creating something, they're getting many more experience points than whether they're just reading something. So I've used this, to be honest, I used it for one course that I ran through a day, and it was really interesting to see how it worked. I would love to use it for a much longer time, and this was some Moodle training that I was running. I'd love to use it in an educational context in a school or a university, and really kind of start to tie some of it into across courses, and could be some really interesting ways to monitor students and motivate students. So that's the second of the plugins that I was going to talk about. So have a play with those. Grab them from Moodle.org, pop them onto your sites. The last little bit is just a couple of useful resources as a takeaway for you. There's two things that I've put on. If you get a chance, have a chat with Fred. He's a great guy. He's also based over in Hong Kong at the moment. I teach with Moodle. You may have seen his website or seen him around, but he did quite an interesting study with his students into a comparison of gamified versus non-gamified courses. If you have a look on I Teach with Moodle, it's got all the results there. It's got a nice little summary at the top that says the findings. So I think I'll just leave that as a little tantalizer for you. But yeah, it's fantastic. This makes interesting reading. And lastly, Natalie Denhamede, who again, she's around the iMoot somewhere. So the idea for this was from Joyce Sitzinger's Moodle, I can't remember the name of it now, Moodle, it's the Moodle Learning Styles poster that Joyce did a few years back. Natalie did one on motivation. So if you just do a quick Google for, I should have stuck the link on here, Moodle for Motivating Learners poster, Natalie Denhamede. It uses some quite specific ideas of gamification. So let's see how much. Oh, okay. The resolution still looks okay on mine. So this is using Bartle's player types. So if you want to read some more about Bartle's player types, check out Wikipedia. Basically, he defines gamers as being one of 4 different types of player, whether they're achievers, explorers, socializers, or killers. And Natalie went through and looked at which of the different Moodle activities would be more suitable for these particular player types. So that's a really interesting resource. Yeah, fantastic, Anna. Thank you. Saved me. That's me being lazy. I could have found it and stuck it on the presentation. Yeah, it's really good. It's really useful. And when Natalie was doing this, which was 2 years ago, I think, I kind of looked over some draft versions and gave her feedback, and that was quite an interesting process, working with her, giving her some ideas. So anyway, that's kind of take a good look at that as well. There's some interesting ideas to come out of that. So that is just about it for me. And that's coming up to 50 minutes. I didn't expect to talk for that long. But yeah, I guess just in summary, don't just stick game elements into your course for the sake of it. It takes a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, and just incorporating these ideas isn't going to necessarily make it a fun, gamed Moodle course. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody's got any questions that they would like to ask. And if you want to connect with me, I'm there at Vinny Stocker on Twitter, or vinny@pukunui.com. Or you can find me on SlideShow or LinkedIn and just other places on the internet. Just have a look. Vinny Stocker, most of my stuff is on there. So thank you very much, guys. Please throw into chat if you've got any comments, questions, or anything. Hardest part is making the theory work in practice for Moodle. Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so, I mean, that was my plan, just to give people a flavor and kind of take all of the ideas that I had floating around and just stick it down on paper. More of a kind of summary, really. So I'll be hanging around for a little while. If you do want to ask me any questions, thank you thank you. Doesn't look like there's any questions. So
Vinny, thanks very much for that. I'd like to pick up on one point that Gareth made there about the hardest part being the theory, making the theory work in practice. And one of the things that I find very intimidating is testing the rules. You can set up all these rules, but the one thing, particularly if you're working with younger adults, is they will spot it if you've made a logic mistake. Is there any sort of way of testing these things, or a system whereby you can do that? Because it's quite tricky if it's not your natural thing to create games.
yeah, I mean, it depends what it depends what kind of game we're talking about for a start. If you're talking about that kind of exploration type game, where you're using restricted certain rules and logic in your restricted activities, then you can plan all that out first in a spreadsheet, so that you know that it all links up properly, or even post-it notes or something like that. But yeah, definitely test all these things out well, using a proper demo student account on your Moodle site, rather than just switching, especially if you're an admin, switch into a student role. Just, create a test student and make sure that it does work properly. Just looking at other people chiming in. And you'll be sure to test things out to take the course. Yeah, that's a very valid point, Anna. If you're building a course that is designed to take learners 20 hours, unless you know, even just testing that could take a couple of hours, even if you know all the answers. So yeah, it depends how complex you want to go with this. Yeah, that's cool, Lynn. Really interesting. So Lynn's talking about gamification of a networking topic. They earn Starfleet badges as they go. Anna's saying Moodle HQ are using such kind of robots. No, I think, Anna, do you mean like BHAT tests or something? I'm not sure. Don't know. Stefan saying I use Post-its and a very large board. I know, it takes so much time, doesn't it? It takes so much time. Mm-hmm. Okay, so just catching up on the chat just down there. Okay, look, the next session is starting fairly soon, and I need to be in a different room to start it off. So I shall stop there and say thank you to you all once again for attending my presentation today.
Thanks very much, Vinny. That was a great show.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.